The alien research team stood close together inside their ship, looking out at the desert below. The sun was blazing, and even from this high up, the ground looked like it was cooking under the heat. "Are you sure it's safe down there?" Vresh, the lead scientist, asked, adjusting his thick suit one more time. His smooth blue skin shifted uneasily under the many layers of protective gear. Earth's sunlight, they were warned, was dangerous. "Yes, Vresh, it should be," replied his assistant, eyes wide as she studied her screen. "But it's strange. This place should be impossible for any life. Yet the humans, they live here?" Their ship landed gently, and the doors opened. A rush of hot, dry air filled the cabin. The aliens tensed up, each of them feeling a sharp tug at their breathing, even through their air filters. Their world was cool and damp. This place was burning hot. Then the humans showed up. With a loud rumble, a group of cars pulled up next to the ship. A team of humans stepped out, wearing loose clothes and simple scarves around their necks. One man lifted his hand and waved, smiling. "Welcome to Earth," he called out, acting like the blazing sun was no big deal at all. Vresh stared, his yellow eyes wide with surprise. These humans weren't even wearing helmets. They had no special suits, just light clothes, a few bottles of water, and smiles on their faces. The human walked right up to Vresh and held out his hand. "I'm Frank, we're here to give you a tour," he said, shaking Vresh's large armored hand. Vresh looked back at his team, who were still standing in the shadows of the ship, shivering from the heat. Slowly he turned to Frank, his voice full of wonder. "Your people live here?" Frank laughed, shrugging his shoulders. "Oh, this? It's not so bad once you get used to it. Wait till you see the hotter places." The next day, the alien team gathered in a small lab they had set up inside their ship. They had prepared several tests to understand how humans could survive in such a tough place. Vresh watched as a human volunteer named Sarah walked into the lab, looking relaxed. She had agreed to show the aliens how her body handled extreme temperatures, like the desert heat. Vresh and his team carefully watched every step she took, adjusting their equipment to capture all the details. Sarah grinned as she took a seat. "So, what's the first test?" she asked casually, as if this were all perfectly normal. Vresh blinked, still amazed. "First, we will measure how your body reacts to heat," he said slowly. He couldn't believe she wasn't worried. In his world, people would collapse in minutes under these conditions. They turned on a heater to raise the room's temperature, just a little at first. The aliens huddled in the cool shadows, feeling uncomfortable, even from the slight warmth. But Sarah looked fine, just sipping from her water bottle, almost amused by their reactions. They turned up the heat again, expecting her to show signs of distress. But she only leaned back and wiped her forehead, laughing. "You guys should try a real desert someday," she said. "This is nothing." Vresh couldn't hide his amazement anymore. He turned to his assistant, whispering, "She should be struggling by now." But Sarah only smiled, taking another sip of water. The team exchanged glances, not understanding how she could be so calm. They decided to switch to another test. This time they wanted to see how Sarah's body handled low oxygen levels, similar to what they faced in high mountains. They carefully reduced the oxygen in the room, thinking this would finally reveal her limits. But again, Sarah surprised them. She took a few deep breaths, slowed her movements a bit, and simply kept going. Vresh was stunned. Humans didn't just survive, they adapted. The aliens took notes frantically, trying to understand what made her so resilient. By the end, Vresh looked at Sarah in pure awe. "Your body, it can handle things we cannot," he admitted, his voice full of wonder. Sarah chuckled, giving a small shrug. "Guess we humans are just built that way," she said, almost casually, but with a hint of pride in her voice. After their first tests, Vresh and his team began to wonder if there was more to human survival than just physical strength. Maybe humans also had some special mental strength that let them handle things that other species could not. The team decided to test this. They set up a series of simulations to see how humans reacted under stress. They wanted to know what humans would do if they thought they were in danger. For this experiment, they created a virtual reality room with sights and sounds of harsh conditions. It was the best way they could think of to stress test the humans. Their first human volunteer was a young woman named Lisa. She was calm and friendly, with a cheerful smile that didn't seem to fit the serious situation. "So what kind of danger are we talking about?" she asked, almost laughing. Vresh felt confused. "Danger is not something to joke about," he said cautiously, adjusting the equipment to start the simulation. Lisa just gave him a quick nod. "No worries, I'm ready." As the simulation began, the aliens watched, expecting her to show signs of fear or panic. First, they created the sound of thunder and flashes of lightning, like a strong storm was coming. But Lisa simply looked around, unfazed. She even made a comment about how it looked almost real. Then they added strong winds and the sound of crashing waves. Lisa braced herself, closing her eyes for a moment, but then she laughed. "Wow, it's like being at the beach during a hurricane," she shouted over the sounds. Vresh couldn't believe it. In his world, storms this intense were rare and terrifying. But here was a human, smiling, even laughing at the simulation. Was this amusement or courage? The team decided to push things further. They increased the intensity of the storm, making the waves louder, the winds stronger. But Lisa only held onto a railing, steadying herself and looking around with fascination. Finally, Vresh stopped the simulation, too baffled to continue. Why did you not show fear?" he asked, genuinely curious. Lisa shrugged, still smiling. "It's just a bit of rough weather. Plus, I knew it was fake. What's there to be scared of?" The aliens exchanged stunned glances. Not only was Lisa unfazed, but she seemed to take it as a challenge. Vresh realized humans had a strange way of facing danger. They didn't just survive. They found ways to cope, even laugh in the face of fear. The aliens recorded every detail, amazed at what they were learning. Humans didn't just adapt physically. They had minds built to handle hardship. They had a spirit the aliens couldn't quite understand, but it was something powerful, something almost inspiring. Over the next few days, the humans and aliens spent time together, sharing stories and learning about each other's worlds. The aliens had thought Earth was harsh, full of things that no sane creature would want to face. But every time they learned more, the humans surprised them. One night, after another long day of experiments, the group gathered around a small fire. Frank, the human who had first greeted them, leaned forward with a grin. "You think the desert's rough? You should hear about some of the other stuff we deal with." Vresh tilted his head, curious. "There is more? Worse than the desert?" Frank chuckled. "Oh yeah, ever hear of a bear?" The aliens looked at each other, confused. "A bear?" one of them asked, struggling with the unfamiliar word. "It's a big animal," Frank explained, stretching his arms wide. "Strong, fast, can take down pretty much anything at once. It lives in forests, sometimes even wanders into human areas, and we just deal with it." The alien's eyes widened. Vresh looked alarmed. "You live near such creatures, and you allow them?" Frank laughed. "Well, we don't go looking for them, but yeah, it's part of life. You learn to be careful, give them space. Some folks even camp out in bear country for fun." At this, Vresh's entire team froze in shock. They couldn't believe what they were hearing. The idea of camping, deliberately going into dangerous places just for fun, was beyond their understanding. Lisa, another human in the group, joined in, sharing stories of mountain climbing and swimming in the ocean where sharks lived. Each tale left the aliens more baffled than the last. They began to realize that humans didn't just survive their Deathworld, they actually sought out challenges in it. One alien spoke up, his voice full of disbelief. "You mean humans choose to go into these places knowing there is danger?" Lisa shrugged, smiling. "Yep, sometimes you just want to push yourself, you know? See what you're made of." The aliens exchanged glances, their expressions stunned. To them, danger was something to avoid, to fear. But these humans seemed to think of it as exciting. Vresh shook his head, struggling to process this. "On our world, we avoid places that could harm us. Your people seek them out?" Frank grinned, leaning back comfortably. "Well, that's humans for you. We like a good challenge." As the night went on, the aliens continued to listen, their admiration and confusion growing with each new story. Earth was starting to feel like a place of endless tests, each one harder than the last, and the humans seemed to face them all with a strange mix of courage and curiosity. By the end of the night, Vresh couldn't help but admit something to himself. These humans weren't just survivors. They were explorers, fearless, curious, and always ready for the next challenge. And in a strange way, he found himself almost admiring them. By now, the aliens had learned a lot about humans. They were fascinated and a little overwhelmed. Vresh and his team began to wonder, what would it be like to experience Earth the way humans did? One of the younger aliens, Tarek, seemed especially eager. If they can do it, maybe we can too, he said, his eyes bright with curiosity. We should try living like the humans, just for a short time. The idea made Vresh nervous. Earth was dangerous, even with all their protective gear. But he could see the curiosity in his team's faces, and he knew they were inspired by the humans' courage. Reluctantly, he agreed. They would try a brief test, just to see if they could handle even a fraction of what humans did. The humans seemed delighted. "We'll make it easy for you," Frank said, grinning. "No deserts, no bears. Just a simple hike through the forest." He promised them it would be a gentle introduction to human life. The next day, the aliens dressed in lighter suits, much less protective than what they usually wore. The humans walked ahead, moving easily along the rough forest trail. The aliens followed, feeling every step like a small battle against the rocks, roots, and uneven ground. As they walked, the temperature rose. For the aliens, even this mild warmth was exhausting. They could feel sweat forming under their suits, their breathing getting heavier. But the humans barely seemed to notice, chatting and laughing as they moved up the trail. Halfway up the trail, Tarek stumbled, his legs shaking. Vresh stopped, breathing heavily, realizing how different this was from anything they were used to. They were pushing themselves far beyond their normal limits. Seeing their struggle, Lisa came back to them with a smile. "Need a break?" Vresh nodded, grateful. The team rested, gulping water and catching their breath, amazed at how challenging even this simple hike was for them. Frank looked at them, a mix of sympathy and pride in his eyes. "It takes time to get used to it, but trust me, you'll feel good once you reach the top." With encouragement from the humans, they continued, step by step. The climb was hard, but they finally made it to the top of a small hill, looking out over the forest below. Vresh was exhausted, but he felt something new, an odd sense of achievement. "Now you know a little bit of what it's like to be human," Frank said, giving Vresh a nod of respect. The aliens couldn't deny it. This hike, though difficult, had shown them a glimpse of what made humans special. They didn't just survive Earth's challenges. They faced them willingly, pushing themselves until they reached the top. And in that moment, Vresh felt a deep respect for humanity. These humans weren't just strong, they were inspiring. Back in their lab, Vresh and his team reviewed everything they had learned. The data was impressive, but what truly stood out was something they hadn't expected. Human resilience went beyond biology. "Look at this," Tarek said, showing his notes. "They endure heat, cold, lack of oxygen. But that's not all. They have something else. It's like a force that isn't just in their bodies." Vresh nodded slowly, understanding. He had seen it in every human they met, this drive, this will to face danger, even to seek it out, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. The aliens continued their analysis, looking deeper into what made humans so unique. They went over each story they'd heard, each test they had run. Every time the humans had shown the same remarkable spirit, whether laughing through storms or hiking up rough trails. After hours of discussion, Vresh finally said what they all were beginning to understand. Humans aren't just strong because of their bodies. They're strong because they believe they can be. The other scientists looked at him in surprise, then nodded, each one realizing the truth of his words. Humans had a strength that couldn't be measured by data or scans. It was something inside them, something that gave them courage in the face of fear and hope in the face of hardship. Vresh began writing his final report, noting down this discovery. He tried to capture the wonder he felt, the admiration that had grown in his heart for this strange species. "Humans do not merely survive Earth," he wrote, "they thrive. They do not fear their world's challenges, they embrace them. And in this, they have found a way to grow stronger, to push past what others would see as limits." Finishing his report, He looked at his team, each one of them quietly reflecting on what they had learned. They had come to Earth to study humans, to understand their biology, but now they were leaving with something much more valuable, a lesson in what it meant to be strong, not just in body, but in spirit. For the first time, Vresh saw humanity not as fragile or reckless, but as something inspiring. They were not just survivors of their world, they were conquerors of it in a way that was both gentle and fierce, driven by a strength that came from somewhere deep inside. As the alien team packed up their equipment, the humans gathered to say goodbye. Vresh stood at the edge of the landing platform, watching them. For the first time, he saw them not just as subjects of study, but as something more. Frank approached, holding out a small metal badge with Earth's symbol on it. "A little souvenir," he said, smiling warmly, "to remember your trip to Earth." Vresh took the badge, feeling an unexpected rush of emotion. This strange, dangerous world had challenged everything he thought he knew about survival. The humans had shown him courage, strength, and a kind of wisdom he hadn't expected. "Thank you," Vresh said, his voice filled with genuine respect, "for showing us your world, and for showing us yourselves." Frank gave him a firm nod, his eyes shining with understanding. "Come back any time, Vresh. There's always more to learn." The humans waved as they stepped back, watching as the alien ship prepared for takeoff. As they lifted off, Vresh looked down at Earth one last time. The planet stretched out below him, vast and wild, its mountains, deserts, and oceans glinting under the sun. He knew now that it was not a world of death, but one of life, a life so strong that it had shaped its people into something incredible. In his final report to his own people, Vresh wrote, "Humans are not only survivors of a difficult world, they are masters of it. Their strength is not just physical, but something deeper, a courage and spirit that make them unlike any species we have ever met. They have conquered their world, not with fear, but with bravery and heart. In meeting them, we have met the true meaning of resilience." As the stars stretched out ahead, Vresh knew he would never forget Earth or the humans who had shown him what true strength looked like. And perhaps someday, he and his team would return to learn more from these remarkable beings.